was luck. But that luck only came about because I was in the room having the sorts of conversations and being open to meeting those sorts of people. You absolutely have to get lucky. You have to get lucky for your business to be successful. And for a business to be really successful, you're going to have to get lucky multiple times. 99 out of 100 of the bands that are signed fail. And the one that succeeds is not necessarily the one that the label put all the money into or thought was going to succeed. You should do your best, and you should try to surround yourself with capable, competent people who you actually enjoy spending time with, because you're going to spend time with them. When I was talking to VCs 3-4 years ago about what I was planning to do, that idea that I was trying to build a profitable business was not very well received. That has softened, I think. So people are a lot more open to that approach now. It seems to me that there is a lot more respect for the idea now that actually if you can get your business to profitability, then your runway is infinite.
Hi everyone, welcome to 23 Mile with me, Kayode of Delaware. Today I'm joined by Jarvey Moss, who started his career as a musician, touring and making music, and also making money while having fun. But along the way, he started writing software and co-founded a tech company called Amigo. 8 years later, scaling successfully, he and his co-founder sold the company. He's at it again, just a month after the company sold. He and another co-founder started a construction tech company, which the origin story is very interesting, which we'll hear on the podcast. On the show today, we'll talk about scaling startups, how one makes the transition from being a musician to a software founder, and all the hard parts about building businesses. Jarvey, welcome to the show. Yes, so let's start at the very beginning. How does one go from being a musician to being a tech founder?
In my case, at least, with no plan whatsoever. It's when you read people's biographies, they always seem to have a brilliant plan for everything they did. But I think that's with the benefit of hindsight. So in my case, I went from being a musician in a band to needing to make a proper living. So I became the tour manager and went around the world with bands and artists doing live music. And then I started dabbling with technology to help manage my own tours. And that's what kind of enabled me to move across. I'm not a technical founder, so I don't write the code myself. But I have worked with a succession of very clever people, luckily, who are very good at that sort of thing. So yeah, that was it. I started with a product in that space, and then actually through music, I met the co-founder of Amigo that you mentioned, and we set off on that journey.
But very interesting. I mean, maybe we'll get started at the beginning. It's not often I find, tech is interesting, right? But definitely music is more interesting. So maybe let's start there. How do you, I see your nice background there. We have some guitars. You showed me the pianos earlier on. How did you get into music?
I just really enjoyed listening to and playing music when I was a kid. And I never lost the love for that, really. So when I went to university and played in covers bands mainly, because it was the cheapest way to get into all the big parties, was if you were there in the band rather than as a guest. And then when I left university, I had a choice. I either try and get a proper job, stay on and do a PhD, or mess about being in a band, which is what I chose to do. Seemed like the most fun.
And when you say you went to university, you went to Cambridge and you had a master's from Oxford as well, right?
I went to school in Cambridge. I went to university in Oxford, yeah. I studied experimental psychology. So I think my life story is a succession of object lessons in choosing to do an interesting thing, but with absolutely no view of how that was going to be useful in the future. And I maybe it's worked out, maybe it hasn't. Very hard to tell, really. But I certainly had an interesting life as a result. I chose to study psychology because I thought the human brain was the most interesting thing that you could study as a scientist. I still think that, actually. And so I was very lucky to be able to work on AI in the late 1990s a little bit. So we were able to play with some of the first neural networks. There's some very, very clever people there doing interesting stuff there, which are obviously reaping the dividends from now a little while later. Yeah, and music was always part of that journey, really, for me. I've always loved music.
I mean, given this is 2026, it's all about AI now. Tell me more about the AI journey. Was that during the masters?
No,
The
it was just because my degree was like the science of cognition, really, and so you could do it in a number of different ways. You could look at developmental psychology or social psychology, whatever. But I was most interested in how the brain works, really, in you know, a sort of neurochemical, hormonal, that sort of level. And so we got to do quite a bit on AI. So there was a whole sort of section on a module, if you like, on AI that we studied, which was fascinating. But at the time, the networks that we were dealing with were considerably smaller, and the computing power available was however many Moore's laws back, that is, orders of magnitude less powerful than there's available today.
and so I'm very, very interested. Okay, so you did that, finished school, finished your masters at Oxford. When you decided to go into music, what was the reception like from your family and parents?
Um, well, luckily, my parents have always been kind of quite, I'd say they've been supportive. They just, whatever I've decided to do, they've just gone, well, fair enough, go and do that then. So yeah, I just decided that that was what I was going to do with my time, make music, spend time with my friends doing that. We had a Prince's Trust loan, which we bought a splitter van with. So we got a Prince's Trust loan, and we used to do weddings and parties at the weekend as a covers band, and then we'd do our original material in the week. And we accidentally became a Prince's Trust success story because we paid our loan back, which I think they weren't necessarily expecting us to do, given that they'd given it to a bunch of musicians. But we bought a white van, a Ford Transit van called Vanessa, and we used to drive up and down the country in the van and play all over the place. So we had some great experiences doing that.
And I mean, very interested. So how did that, over the, if I recall correctly, you did this for, I don't know, was it about 8 years? What was the transition from touring band? How did you grow? How did you and the band grow from there?
Well, we actually got signed, and there's a very long story about that, which I won't tell now because it would take up the rest of the time we have available. But we got signed to a major record label, more or less against our wishes and theirs, having unintentionally won a TV talent contest on Channel 4, which we had been kicked out of and then reinstated to. And it was it was an interesting time. But we got to make an album that was released on a major label, which was quite a cool experience. We were actually the nail in the coffin for a studio in London called Townhouse. We were the last album to be made at the studio in Shepherd's Bush, which was where the famous Phil Collins "In the Air Tonight" drum fill was recorded in there, and I think Queen recorded there, like loads of people. It was one of those studios, but unfortunately, like most of the big recording studios in London now, it's been turned into flats. So we were the last people to record there. So that was the death knell for Townhouse Studios, sadly. They were telling us, actually, you were saying before we started that studio time's expensive if you're trying to record podcasts and so on. But the day rate that they were charging at the studio was the same when we were in there as it was about 20 years before. So it's the same in pounds. So all of that inflation had happened elsewhere, but the
Rent, but that costs rent, outgoings.
yeah.
Wow.
So hence it's flats now.
And how was that album? I mean, how well did the album perform?
Um, no one's ever heard of it. I think it's probably fair to say. We had we had a small and very loyal fan base, but it was not a commercial success. Artistically, I'm happy we made it. We made a good record, in my opinion. But that's all I can really say for it.
Very nice. But you mentioned you started touring, touring the world with other bands. How did that transition happen?
I wanted to buy a house, and the bank laughed at me when I asked if I could get a mortgage as a musician. So I thought, how can I make money from what I know? And I'd been looking after our band and touring to at least the UK. So that's what I went. I basically went on the internet, found anyone who looked like they were doing something that looked like tour management, and emailed them and said, "Do you need any help?" And luckily, one of them answered, and that got me started. And I did a lot of my early tour management with UK hip hop. So this sort of before grime was a word that anyone used. So I was like the poshest, most middle class, whitest person in most of the rooms that I was going in. But it was great fun, and I got on really well with all the people I worked with as well.
So what was, I mean, very nice. Were you able to then get the mortgage? How financially rewarding was the tour manager stage compared to musician?
Well, compared to musician, almost anything is remunerative, I'd say. Yeah, I mean, there are obviously a few people make money from music, but I think most people, if you're making music, you should be doing it for the love, and if the money follows, then that's a wonderful, lucky thing to happen to you. So yes, I definitely made more money as a tour manager than I did as a musician. Not by not saying that I was ever going to be a rich man from being a tour manager, but it did let me get a mortgage.
Nice. And then how was that? What then took you traveling as well? What was that like? What was the tour manager stage of your career like?
Yeah, it was great fun in many respects being a tour manager. I got to visit a huge number of countries, traveled all over the world, had some experiences that you don't normally get to have in a normal job. I only worked with a handful of artists, really. I was lucky that I had good relationships with the people I worked with, so they wanted to carry on working with me. Yeah, it's funny. It was one of those jobs, though, where I was permanently both jet lagged and on a 24-hour working basis, really, because you've got gigs in America, you've got gigs in Europe, and you've got gigs in Asia. So you have to be dealing with the local teams across from the record labels and the promoters all the way across the time zones. So it's pretty relentless in that respect. But it was one of those jobs that we used to joke about when we talked to other tour managers. You sort of joke about it, that the only person you could moan about your job was another tour manager, because if you try and tell anyone else that it was a bit difficult, they would just say, "Hang on a minute, where have you just flown from?" And you'd be like, "Well, yeah, I suppose there is that." But not as glamorous as perhaps you might think, but still, it was great fun, and made some great friends from doing it as well.
And so was it during this stage that you started building software to help that you wanted to use as well?
Yeah, that's right. I wanted there was a platform, a touring software platform that was widely used, but it didn't work very well on mobile, and so it wasn't really cloud based. So it didn't. It is now, but it wasn't at the time. So I built with a technical co-founder who was from the music world, we built a platform, which I think probably the best thing about it was its name, and that's because I love a pun. The software itself was called Turing Machine because it was for touring, but if you're familiar with Alan Turing, the computer
Yeah.
scientist, he proposed the idea of a universal computer, which is called now a Turing machine. So that was the joke, basically, which I was very pleased with, and that was probably enough.
Very nice. So, I mean, how did this go from, okay, you know what, let's just build something we want to use to a proper business? What was that initial phase like?
Well, with Turing Machine, it didn't really. We just used it on the tours that I was doing, and I wanted to stop touring. And during my time in music, I'd met the guy that became my co-founder on Amigo. This guy called Mike Adam, and Mike is a serial technology entrepreneur who's built disruptive technology businesses primarily in financial services, actually. But I met him through music, and we got on very well. And for very long story anyway, but we ended up going into an existing business and sort of restarting it together, and that would have been in about 2014 or something now, so a little while ago.
You mentioned existing business. So effectively a restructuring, was it like a distressed / restructuring situation?
Yeah, I guess so. It was an existing business that had, it appeared to have technology that was capable of doing something that Mike and I had planned to do. So we had an idea for a business that we were going to do, and we found this existing business that had what looked like a piece of the puzzle that we needed. But then it turned out that needed a bit more help in and of itself. And then Mike and I came into that business, and then sort of effectively we restarted it. Although we did manage to retain a few of the people who were involved, who were working there. And that became Amigo Technology, which is now called Good Growth Technologies, part of Good Growth. It's a tool for large enterprises, B2C companies, to enable them to try new products, new experiences quickly in the digital realm, and then if they work, to roll them out across their infrastructure really quickly, and sort of scalably. If you're trying to do a digital transformation in a large organization, you're pretty much doomed to fail. They don't really work. So we were trying to enable those businesses to transform, but to do it in a way that was much more measurable and much more measured.
You've done a lot of this risky stuff, the musician. You said something earlier on around not many people make money from music. You just have to love it. I feel like startups are, in a ways, somewhat similar. Or was that your experience with Amigo, or did it really work out well, just from the get-go?
No. It took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. We started out focused on travel and hospitality, that sort of sector, because we had a very large client in that space that was a really good case study. We got to profitability, started expanding really well, got other clients on from that sector. And then there was this little thing called COVID that came along, and travel and hospitality, obviously not a great sector to be in at that time. We were actually the only third-party provider that was retained by our large client, and this large travel client at the time, because we were delivering so much for them, basically. But that really took the wind out of the sails for the business, and it took a little while to reposition it. And now, post sale with Good Growth, it's focused on e-commerce and online retail, and it's got you can see the brands on the website. Some big UK and US brands using that technology now.
Very interesting. And from what I see, you did not raise a lot of money from VCs. I think, was it just an angel round you did to get it started?
We did. Amigo was entirely angel founded all the way through. Angel funded, sorry, all the way through. Um, actually just had a call with another VC, and I said I've got to go because I've got to do a podcast with a VC. But but so I don't. It's not that I don't talk to VCs, but I think for early stage businesses, you have to think very carefully about how you are going to fund your business and what the profile of that business looks like, because not every business is suitable for venture investment, but not early stage venture investment. So what we've done with Saible is similar to what we did with Amigo, actually, is raised our money from angel investment, and as much as possible from people who have some connection to the problem that we solve, so that they understand what we're doing and in some cases can help. So we have a couple of people from private equity who are shareholders. We've got a lot of people from construction as shareholders, some people with sort of legal backgrounds, so various people who understand the space that we're in. And that means you can explain the good and the bad of what's going on in your business, and they have the context of the industry because they're aware of what's going on, and that's really helpful. If you're building a B2C and you need to scale really quickly and dominate a market, and particularly if you're located on the west coast of America, then there's a very different model.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to do is to get a business that reaches profitability as early as possible, and then we can grow on slightly different terms. So I do anticipate that we'll take institutional capital, but it will be growth capital rather than sort of early stage seed capital.
Diving a bit deeper into the whole fundraising conversation, which is one where I think a lot of first-time founders, a lot of them listening to this, struggle. You talked about what you're doing with Saible now, what you did with Amigo. Even raising from angels, it's not particularly easy. How did it work out well for you with the two companies over the past 10 years?
Well, in the first company, I was lucky enough to have a co-founder who had been through that journey multiple times and was extremely credible. And that makes a huge difference. And Mike himself put quite a bit of money into that company because he'd obviously been successful in past technology businesses of his own. So I was able to watch and learn from somebody who is a top operator at doing this, which was absolutely invaluable. And I've tried to take those lessons across into what I'm doing at Saible, where actually Mike is our non-exec chair, so there's still a connection back to Amigo there as well. It's network. You have to build a network, and we talked before in our sort of pre-chat about how I got into doing Saible, which I imagine we might talk about in a bit. But I had no network in construction and no network in finance when I decided that I was going to start a construction finance business. So I had to do some network building. But you just have to be relentless, and you have to be well organized, and you go after that, building that network. And if you do that and you're consistent and you keep turning up, eventually lucky breaks happen.
What I hear is it's similar to sales. It's all about networking, meeting people, talking to people. Again, maybe just staying on that topic of fundraising a little more. I talk to a lot of founders who struggle as well to say, but angel investors, how do I pitch to them? So again, maybe splitting them into professional angel investors versus HNIs who you know or who you've been introduced to. For you at Amigo and at Saible now, which of these two groups do your investors fall into?
At Saible, it's definitely what's the word? Non-professional. They're not professional angel investors for the most part in our company. And again, I was very lucky in that my co-founder at Saible is Dr. Tim Whitehill. He is from the construction world. He has run a civil engineering business for 20 odd years that he started. So he's extremely well plugged in to that network. So really, I can't take any credit, because on Amigo, I had a co-founder who could do all of that heavy lifting, really. And coming across into Saible world, I had a co-founder who knows all of the right kind of people to enable us to raise that money. And this is a recurring theme for me, is you absolutely have to get lucky. You have to get lucky for your business to be successful. And for a business to be really successful, you're going to have to get lucky multiple times. And again, if you look at the books that people write when people are interested enough in their lives that they think they better write a biography of some sort, and it looks like a perfectly planned journey, but I guarantee that all the way through Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, whoever you want to look at, there will be multiple moments where they had a massive stroke of luck, or we like to call it serendipity. And if you look at my much less impressive history, the moments where I've met the people who were my co-founders were absolutely serendipitous. It was luck. But that luck only came about because I was in the room having the sorts of conversations and being open to meeting those sorts of people. So I think serendipity and luck are absolutely critical to your life generally. And the only thing you can really do is try to put yourself into situations where serendipitous things might happen to you.
Very interesting. I think it looks like one of those things we keep coming back to. It's all about people. But it was something we talked about earlier on around survivorship bias. What you built with Amigo Technologies, you sold successfully. It still exists today. You built it again. But you're one of the success stories. On my side, I built a tech startup that failed very woefully. Many more will fail than succeed. Apart from luck, which you've talked about, what else do you think has to be in place for a tech startup to survive and succeed?
I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question, Cody.
I like that.
I think there are necessary characteristics, or there are things that are helpful. So I think you can increase the probability of success, and there are a bunch of things that I think that entails. So for one, I've already talked about, your network is really important. I think it's extremely difficult to build any sort of a business in complete isolation. Someone involved is going to have to find customers. If it requires investment, someone is going to have to find those investors. So you have to be connected to the world, and you have to be listening and open to the world. I think it helps a lot if you're well organized, because there's so much chaos in a startup. So having a bit of structure and process in your life probably helps. And I think generally also, but this is much more personal, because there are lots of people who start very successful businesses who are unpleasant to many of the people they deal with. But I actually think it doesn't hurt to be nice to people generally. Whether you call it karma or fate or whatever you want to call that, I think if you are a positive person and you're positive in your interactions with other people, they are much more likely to take away a positive impression of you and then do something for you later. So I just think, if in doubt, you've got the choice between being nice to people or not being nice. Just be nice.
Very interesting. Maybe just wrapping up the Amigo Technologies story, and then we can get to talk about Saible, which you're building now. What was the prompt? At what point in the journey did you and Mike decide that you wanted to sell?
That one's fairly easy. That was after the COVID lockdowns and everything else had finished. It was a Herculean effort to keep that business going, retain as many of the people as we could. We had to cut really hard because our revenue dropped almost overnight from very healthy. We were profitable down to very close to zero. Um, so it was a really bruising experience to go through, and we weren't alone in that. For millions of people, the pandemic was a really tough time. But millions of people died. All of the consequences. It's a pretty historic thing to have lived through. But by the time we had successfully navigated through all of that, you've got to pick yourself back up and go again. And I think at that point, we felt that it was better to bring in some of the things that we needed our clients to do. So that where the business is now with Good Growth. Good Growth was a consultancy that was a sort of data-driven consultancy providing B2C companies with ideas and advice on things that they should be doing. And Amigo provided the ability to test those ideas really quickly and then, verify or disprove them. So bringing those two businesses together just made perfect sense. And as the success of the company now shows, that was a really good move. So yeah, it was really clear. It just COVID was horrific, frankly.
I mean, sorry to hear that, but at least you kept the company alive. I mean, I was in, it's not disclosed, it's not public, but are you able to say how good the acquisition was? Was it a good return for you and Mike after 8 years of building, or was it just, let's keep it alive?
Uh, I'd say it's primarily keeping it alive. I'm still a shareholder. So I didn't sell my shares when the company was acquired. And so I'm still a shareholder in that company, and I believe in the technology and the team. And so far, the evidence suggests that I was right to do that, which I'm very relieved about.
Fingers crossed. Again, like I said, very few tech companies manage to stay alive. Build Amigo is still there in the world, and fingers crossed it all ends up well. After 8 years building, you sold there, you left. Did you retain some day-to-day responsibilities for a while? Was it a clean break from an operational point of view?
No, I gave a very long notice to Mike, and Jake was our technical co-founder. He's now the managing director. So told them very early what the plan was, and we went off and looking for a home for the business and looked at various different options. Ended up with Good Growth, which has been a fantastic outcome for them. But I knew I wasn't going to stay on in the business after the sale. I wanted to do something different. Again, I'd say another object lesson in what not to do. I didn't know what I was going to do next. So I left, even though I'd given all of this notice, I knew I was going to go and start something, but I didn't know what I was going to start. And I didn't really work on my next thing while I was working still for Amigo, because we were putting the sale together. So it was pretty busy. So when I finished, I was then left going, right, what am I going to do now? And I wanted to do something where there was a big commercial opportunity, but where it also had a positive impact on the world, which is a bit of a cheesy thing to say, but I figured, I probably got one or two businesses left in me, so why not? And to begin with, I got really interested in renewable energy. So I thought I'd try and work in renewable energy. So while I was investigating to see if there was a space that could use my skills in renewable energy, I was also doing early stage consultancy work for early stage businesses. So helping people with things like financial models, finding new headquarters, how to set up and manage their business, like all sorts of esoteric and different things, which was really enjoyable. Got to work with some fantastic founders on their businesses, really passionate people doing a very wide range of things. So I really enjoyed doing that. And that gave me the time to think about what I was going to try and do and have those meetings and meet those people as well. So yeah, I got talking to people that worked in renewable energy, and through that began speaking to people who built solar farms and wind farms and things like that. And one of them told me a story about what had happened to one of his subcontractors on a project that he was doing as a consequence for that subcontractor of another business going insolvent on a project that they were working on. When that business went insolvent, it took all the money that was owed to this particular subcontractor. It was gone. And as a consequence, that business also went insolvent. And the guy who started it and run it for 30 years lost everything. He lost his home, his marriage fell apart. His wife was the bookkeeper. The marriage fell apart. His two sons worked in the business, and one of his sons tried to take his own life because of all the stress that was caused by this. So it was a really powerful story, and it hit me on two levels. It was, on one level was the human story, that it was just so unjust and unfair that this had happened, because they'd done nothing wrong. They'd done all the work that was asked of them. They paid everybody, and then they weren't paid. But also the sort of more lizard brain bit says, well, if that's your project, if you're the client that's building that thing, you don't want a subcontractor. That you don't want that happening. They're a good supplier. You want them working on the project and finishing it. So I got interested in the space and found out that there was a solution to that problem of sorts, which is a thing called a project bank account. So the idea is that instead of giving the money to the supply chain from the top, you put it into a bank account for the project, and then it's held in trust. And that is what's used then to pay that supply chain. And that's been well used in UK construction, but not very well implemented. It's a very analog solution with a whole bunch of weaknesses. It is still the best answer to the question that was available using the technology that was available when it was created, but the technology's moved on. So I saw an opportunity to take that technology and apply it to that idea. And that is what Saible now does, and that eventually became Saible.
I want to say it's sad occurrence, but we kind of fit into what you were trying to do. You wanted to make it friends. How was it building a tech company the second time around compared to the first time?
It's definitely been easier. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, right? As you've repeatedly pointed out. But it's definitely been easier because I was very lucky that working with Mike, he had been through multiple previous technology companies. So I was able to learn from the mistakes that he had previously made that we didn't then make again. We made other mistakes instead, of course, because you always make mistakes, but we didn't repeat mistakes that he'd learned from before. And as a consequence, I was able to learn a lot about how shareholding works. I'd never really even seen a P&L before I started that business, because I did a lot of budgeting as a tool manager, but I'd never seen a P&L before, or a cash flow or a balance sheet. Actually, I'd seen a cash flow because we did have those. But so there was just a whole load of stuff I needed to learn, learning about attracting and retaining, high caliber people with very much in demand skills, highly technical people, all of that stuff was just really, they were great lessons to be able to learn. And I've tried to apply a lot of that in Saible. So we've got quite a small team, but it's very high functioning. We've got exceptional people working in the business. And I work on trying to create a really positive culture so that people enjoy their jobs, they enjoy their work, and they don't want, hopefully, to move on and leave. They want to stay part of the journey.
What's your approach in terms of cracking that and you're getting the money in, especially for a business that is, I would say, reasonably funded, without a limitless budget?
Well, I'm not going to pretend for a second that I have the answer to that question either. I don't understand marketing, and I don't really understand sales, I think it's fair to say. But I just do my best at it. I've particularly find a lot of the way you have to market early stage businesses now, so LinkedIn and sort of personal brand of the founder stuff, it doesn't come very naturally to me. I don't really enjoy that, but it's a necessary thing that you need to do. I don't have any social media accounts, never have, but I do have a LinkedIn account, and I use it pretty relentlessly because it's the best way for me to meet interesting people. And obviously, it's that network that eventually generates sales and long-lasting client relationships. So I'm not going to try and provide advice to anybody. I don't think you should listen to me about selling. Beyond, I guess, trying not to be overly focused on your product obviously you need to be focused on your product when you're building it, and you need to be listening to what people are telling you about your product, even if they don't know that they're telling you about it. But you've got to try to focus on the problem that they have, because if you don't solve a problem for them, and this is I see this, we see this in Saible at the moment. There are lots of people who look at our solution and go, that's really clever, it'd be brilliant if we had that, but then they don't move on and actually implement it. So I think when you're doing something really disruptive, what you're looking for is the crossing the chasm sort of classic. You have your early adopters, your main market, and then your laggards there. I think if you're doing something that's totally new and disruptive, you're not even looking for early adopters. You're looking for half a dozen, we call them evangelists. So we're looking for people who see what we're doing and are so convinced that this is right, that they will put their own professional and social capital behind getting their organization to adopt it. We've been lucky that we found a couple of those people, and you need them to allow you to find the early adopters, because even your early adopters would rather be second if they can rather than first. So I think that is that. So I said I wasn't going to give any advice, but I would give that. I think you've got to go and find those evangelists and nurture those relationships and look after them, bend over backwards for them, listen to what they're telling you, and with a stroke of luck, then you'll cross the first chasm, which is not a very big one, into early adopters. But if you can't get across that, then you're stuck.
Yeah, good luck with that. And like we said earlier on, it is a continuous process, always selling. We touched on funding earlier on. You touched about angels versus VCs. And if the information I have is right, you've raised about £3 million with Saible, right? Am I correct? And, and all of that with angels. How do you see the funding / profitability / growth journey over the next few years? What's your vision? How do you want to thread that needle?
I've got quite a clear goal, and when I started looking at starting my business, so probably 4 years ago now. Saible's 3 years old, but I did a lot of research before actually starting it. I was very clear that I wanted to build a business that was profitable, and I wanted to get to profitability as quickly as I could. Now, we're still 3 years in and we're not profitable, so arguably I've been a dismal failure on that front, but the goal remains the same. There are a lot of technology businesses, I think in SaaS world particularly, and in B2C, where profitability is something that is going to follow. So the crucial thing is to build market share effectively at all costs. I think when I was talking to VCs 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, about what I was planning to do, that idea that I was trying to build a profitable business was not very well received. That has softened, I think. So people are a lot more open to that approach now. I don't know what's changed in the sort of macro environment that's led to that, because I don't follow the VC world and the early investment world particularly closely, but it seems to me that there is a lot more respect for the idea now that actually, if you can get your business to profitability, then your runway is infinite. And that puts you in a very different position to a runway where you're looking at your burn rate and you can see a wall coming because you're going to run out of cash. So yeah, that's my goal. My goal is to get us to profitability, and then we look at how we expand. And the options open to you to expand if you have an infinite runway, if you do have an infinite runway, are wider and more interesting than the options that are available if you don't.
Very interesting. You said the VCs are more receptive to the idea of, a profitable startup. And it's exactly the same thing I'm seeing as well. And, the explanation I see, or what I see, is a lot of the VCs in, 2020, 2021, only wanted to invest in fast growing startups. But what they've seen is that it's a fool's errand. Very few of those startups actually ever make it. They've raised all their money, maybe never even managed to sell or, to have enough clients, and then they shut down. So I think, investors are now seeing that there's a middle ground where you can build a maybe $5-10 million business, sell it for good money, return money to investors. So, which is always a good thing for investors and for founders. But for Saible, because I'm very certain you're going to achieve this. Do you envisage being able to sell the company for a good return in the years to come, or are you looking at a steady, successful business that just churns out cash? What's the ideal scenario for you?
The ideal scenario for me, I think, is probably both of those things. So that's the dream, is that you generate a business that is steady, grows fast, and can give you liquidity, a big return as part of that journey, because that both of those things are achievable. But realistically, it's impossible to know, right? I can give you some indication of what I think might happen in 3 months' time, and I will almost certainly be wrong about that. I will definitely be wrong about 6 months' time. So, looking beyond, I'm not a psychic. I just don't know what's going to happen. I think again, you need to be open.
This is a recurring theme in our conversation where you literally just pick on something, seems like you do your best at it, and you don't really bother too much about, about where that goes. Is that correct in saying that's like your approach to life?
I am very bothered about where it goes, but I am very much of the opinion that you can't control the outcome. You should do your best, and you should try to surround yourself with capable, competent people who you actually enjoy spending time with, because you're going to spend time with them. Life's too short to deal with. I'm trying to think of a word I can use that's not have to be beeped out. So people you don't want to spend time with, don't spend time with them. But beyond that, do your best, try and plan ahead, think about what might happen, but it'll almost certainly be something else that either buries you or turns it into a massive success story that you didn't see coming in either realm, whether it's a success or a failure. But this is another thing that I share with Mike. You can't control the outcome.
I mean, this is why this resonates with me. Is it's something that took me many years of being a tech founder and then venture to realize. The media sells you on the success stories. You go in there, you raise money, you in 5 years, you exit. It took me many years to come around to, it seems, your approach where you turn up, you meet people, you do your best, you can't control the outcome, you enjoy the journey. So it's a place where I'm in life. That's why it resonates with me.
And I think I extend this. I totally agree with that. Obviously, we have the same philosophy there, but I extend it to or connect it to my time in music. So I think there are a lot of analogies between being in a band and being in a startup. You have an idea, you have a thing that you want to achieve, and you need to work together with your bandmates to make that happen. And there is the equivalent of VCs in the music industry, or there was when I was doing it, and they were called record labels then. And they had very similar sorts of structures, even though, on the surface of it, they look like different businesses. They'd have scouts, there's people going out, everybody's interested in the same band at the same time as everybody else. So you get hot investment opportunities, if you like. And 99 out of 100 of the bands that are signed fail. And the one that succeeds, or the artist that succeeds, is not necessarily the one that the label put all the money into or thought was going to succeed. After it's been a success, everybody involved will tell you how amazing their part was in that success and how they contributed to it. But in reality, most of the time, no one knows which act is gonna land, and that's still true as far as I can tell. Acts that they pump loads of money into go nowhere, and then suddenly you get a surprise hit. And I think that VC is very similar. And I think there's some interesting, or early stage investment, rather, I should say, just generally is very similar. I think there's a possibility that there are enough funds that there is a normal distribution of outcomes across those funds. And there are therefore one or two funds who are several standard deviations out, where they've had multiple successes, and there are many funds at the other end that have had enormous failures. And then there's, in the middle here, there are funds that have had maybe one, and it's maybe just about returned the fund, or maybe not even that. So maybe it's skewed away from the center. But and the point to me is that the funds that are at the successful end now, they get presented with the top opportunities, and maybe they had some input into those successes along the way. So they're not, a lot of them are started by very capable people with very good backgrounds. So they're not just randomly guessing, but I think there's a lot more chance involved in those success stories than everyone involved would like to admit. And then once you have that success, it breeds more success. Exactly as in music, if you're a manager, breaking your first artist is the most difficult thing. But once you've broken that artist, you've got a much better chance of breaking your second artist, because everybody thinks you know something they don't.
What I take from that is do your best, achieve, even if it's a minor success, and then just keep building on it and enjoy the journey. That's what somebody told me. Enjoy the journey.
Absolutely. I totally like, because you say your startup failed, right, when you talk about it. But I mean, I can look at most of the things that I've done, and I can tell you a story about that thing that makes it look like a success, and I can tell you another story about the same thing that makes it look like a failure. So it's up to you what narrative you put on your life. And for me, what I've done, not necessarily particularly consciously, is decided that I'm just going to do things that I think are interesting and fun. And as a consequence, I have lots of stories, most of which I won't be telling on this this interview.
And maybe also just one point. You talked a lot about networking, meeting people. We on the pre-call, we also mentioned the Budwave. Before Budwave, what were the approaches or networks or communities that you found very useful for this meeting people and allow serendipity to happen?
I just go to loads of events, and I still do. Now the events that I'm going to are slightly different to the events that I was going to when I was starting out, so the profiles of the events have changed. But if you go to, don't necessarily need to be networking events, but you just need to go to events where the kind of people that you want to meet are likely to be. And then you need to talk to people. And 90% of those conversations won't go anywhere. But that doesn't make them uninteresting conversations. Everybody's got something interesting to say. And 10% of those conversations will lead somewhere. When I was starting out on this journey, I was really focused. I had two questions that I would ask everybody that I was talking to. Number one, I've got this idea. Can you please tell me why I'm wrong? Because if you don't tell me and I waste 5 years of my life, then you should feel bad about yourself. So tell me why I'm wrong so that I don't waste my time. And second, if you think this is interesting, can you please introduce me to two other people who you think will be interested in this? And then I managed those conversations. So I would keep track of who had introduced me to people. I'd keep track of conversations that I needed to follow up on. And by doing that, that's, 2 breeds 4, breeds 8, it's exponential. Some of those conversations fall away, but enough of them come through that you can continue to build. So I do think you have to be well organized with it.
Very interesting. And I'm definitely going to borrow that. In wrapping up, I might just have a few quick fire questions for you. Of all the countries or places or towns or cities you visited, as a touring manager and music days, which one would you like to go back to?
I loved being in New Zealand. I think New Zealand's incredible. I have never done a gig in South America, which I thought was a great shame. I really like New York and LA. I think they're fantastic cities. I genuinely think that London is the best city in the world. I don't live there. But having traveled a lot, I don't think there's anywhere that has the same breadth and depth of culture, diversity, stuff going on. It's just an incredible place. I'm lucky enough I can get there in an hour and a bit from where I live. So yeah, I do think London's amazing, but there are so many places to see. And actually, as a tour manager or even as a musician, you don't really see a lot of the places that you go to. So I've been in a lot of hotels. I've been in the back of a lot of venues, and I've spent a lot of time on planes and tour buses and things like that. But that is not how you get to know and love a country or a city.
Fingers crossed you can, get back to many places, but definitely I agree London is a great place. Second question, do you still make music today?
Yep. We very, very slowly now because time is hard to come by, but we will have, I will have an album out with some friends before the end of this year.
Interesting. Yeah. Looking forward to that. Definitely something that is part of you. And then final one, if you could describe entrepreneurship in one word, what will it be?
Fun.
I like that. Definitely. Okay, thank you so much. And this has been a very interesting conversation. I mean, we could go on and on, but really appreciate the conversation, really appreciate the insights, and I'm sure our listeners will do too. So thank you so much, Jarvey, and all the best as going to build them Saible.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been great talking to you, Coyote.